Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MT4MH Studios, where we spread our love and we share our ketogenic lifestyles. This is the Find Your Keto Show, and I'm your host, Stephen T., ready to guide you on your low-carb journey. Today, we have an incredible guest, Emily Penton, whose story is a testament to the healing power of nutrition and mindset. Emily has transformed her life from battling debilitating mental and physical illnesses, including bipolar disorder and multiple sclerosis, to thriving on a carnivore diet. Her journey is nothing short of miraculous, and she's here to share how eating meat and fat played a crucial role in her recovery. But Emily's story doesn't stop with her own transformation. She's also a coach and the creator of the Inner Clarity System, a groundbreaking 8-week coaching program designed to help others achieve their own mind, body, and spiritual transformations. With a master's degree in clinical counseling, Emily combines her professional expertise with her personal journey to guide clients step by step. Today, Emily will share the details of her life-changing journey, her unique approach to previously eating raw meat and fat, and how she's helping others find clarity and transformation through her coaching. Emily, how are you today?
Hey, good. Thanks so much for having me, Stephen.
It's really great to have you here. So I was initially introduced to you after I appeared on Dave Mack, and I think it was one of your friends saw my interview on the Dave Mack show, The No Carb Life.
Yeah.
And in the comments, they put in a video of you from 2 years ago. It was October of 22. And the title of that YouTube video was Feeling Joyful After 3 Years of the Easiest Raw Carnivore Diet. I was like, oh, wow, I've been doing raw for like 6-8 months at the time. And I went and watched the video, and I was literally almost in tears. I got so emotional about it because I saw for the first time somebody actually doing what I do. And I thought that I was a loner. I thought I was all by myself. And then seeing that you were doing this 2 years ago, and it was a large pile of raw beef fat and a smaller pile of raw beef. And that's exactly what I had been doing for a while now. And it was amazing to see. And right away I said, well, this is somebody at the very least I want to be friends with. I want to talk to. And then I like to dream big. So right away I was thinking, well, I want to have her as a guest on my show. I didn't know your story at the time. I didn't know that you had appeared on a million podcasts already and that you've been on all the biggest shows. I'm just very grateful to have connected with you and be friends and to have you here on the show today.
Me too. And it's so funny because I have this mixed feeling when people can relate to my story because I'm like, yay, somebody can relate to me. But then I'm like, oh, that means that they've experienced pure misery. So it's kind of horrible. Kind of like, I'm sorry.
Well, it was the healing part of your story that I was relating to there. So it's the bright side, right?
Yes,
It's that we both found the path that works for us.
absolutely.
So you've got really an amazing story. It's not just the mental health, it's also the MS. And I've had people on that have cured their bipolar, reversed heart disease, all these amazing things that we're hearing. But I haven't spoken to anybody yet who has been able to treat their MS. And I'm really excited to hear about that.
Yeah. It's honestly, if it didn't happen to me, I probably wouldn't really believe it. Um, And I had no idea that I had MS until I started eating this way. So I had all the symptoms, but nothing had formulated into a diagnosis yet. But carnivore did not obviously cause MS, but it pulled back the curtain to reveal, oh, this is underlying. This is what we're going through. Because I had foot drop in 2016 and I wasn't diagnosed until 2019. I had no idea. Nobody had ever said multiple sclerosis until I got to that point.
What is foot drop?
So whenever you're walking, you don't have to tell your feet to stay up above the concrete or the floor. You just walk, and one foot just like goes this way, and it's just like on its own, and you got to like So you have to walk a lot slower, and you have to walk very intentionally and tell your foot up, forward, up, forward. Like, and you don't know how to tell your feet to walk whenever you never did it for 40 years. Like, I've never told my feet to walk. They just do. And so that's what foot drop is.
You're laughing about it, but it does not sound funny at all. It sounds terrible.
No, it was absolutely terrifying, to all of a sudden have my body not work. And for me, it really hit whenever I was 40 years old. And my everybody in their MS story has a different thing that got them that got them the actual diagnosis. And mine was acute dysphagia, where my throat just stopped swallowing and I just couldn't swallow water. And so went to the hospital, the ER, they did an MRI, and then they found the lesions on my brain. And that was my initiation into MS. And then soon thereafter, I couldn't walk without an assistive device, and I had delayed and slurred speech as well. So I was already in just absolute misery with bipolar disorder. I mean, it was debilitating. It was rapid cycling bipolar disorder. And then to get this MS diagnosis and not be able to walk, it was just like, I'm done. I'm done. I am done. But that's why I call my business Inner Clarity System, because I had this inner knowing, this inner clarity that if I keep eating fatty animal meat, I think it's going to improve. I never in a million years thought it was going to go away and I'd be able to do CrossFit now and that I'd be off my psych meds for 5+ years. Never in a million years did I think that was going to happen. I just thought we were going to move the needle. I thought I was just going to improve my MS symptoms, improve my bipolar disorder. Had no idea it was going to like mitigate it.
That's really amazing. So first, I want to say that I'm really sorry that you went through that. I know what it's like to deal with the rapid cycling bipolar because that's what I had, and I would be terrible in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd be good, and it'd be terrible again at night. And my typical pattern was to have a bad morning and bad afternoon, and then better at night, and then not want to go to bed because I was feeling so good. I'd be hypomanic at night. So I know what that's like. I can't imagine having the MS and the difficulty walking and stuff on top of it. Because at least for me, I've always been highly active, and a lot of the things that provide me relief are some of the activities I do, like kayaking, working out, going to the gym, flying power kites. You know, all these cool things that I need my body to do. So I can't imagine what it would be like if I was struggling with MS like you are.
Yeah, it was scary. I was not anticipating that at all. But I just kept going, and I think honestly, I am grateful for the bipolar disorder because there's a certain grit that you develop, um, being in the trenches of mental illness hell, that you just have this push to just keep getting up. And so when I got the MS, yes, it was devastating, but it was just like, all right, like just pull up the sleeves, like let's go. You know, we're just going to keep barreling through life like we have been for the past 40 years, because that's what I had, those highs and lows from bipolar disorder. And I was like, all right, let's just keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And it may confuse people to hear you say that you're grateful to have the bipolar, but it set you up for success in your other challenges in life. And that's something that I could echo is that I am grateful that the diagnosis is bipolar. I reject the diagnosis. I reject the DSM, all that crap. It's neurometabolic dysfunction or metabolic brain dysfunction. So my mitochondria in my brain are just not processing energy correctly. But I am grateful for it because it's led me to be stronger like you and to be able to face challenges. But it's also gotten me down this path where I have found how great life can be when I'm doing all these metabolic therapies and feeling the best that I can, and then able to be a competent father to my daughter as well, which is the most important aspect for me.
Absolutely. And actually, working with hundreds of people with bipolar disorder, the diagnosis, um, they're some of the greatest people I've ever met on this planet. Like, I think bipolar disorder is a superpower. You just got to manage it. Like Superman just can't go off like bing 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 bing, with like all this craziness. And that's what we are. We're just like we're all over the place. But whenever we manage it and we can hone it in and focus, oh my gosh, our brains come up with things that the neurotypical person never would. So I actually see it as a gift, and I love it. Um, but I recognize how miserable it is whenever you're not doing these modalities to, really have healthy mitochondria.
Of course, yeah, but the suffering is worth it. Just like anything else in life, you have to go through some suffering to get to the good side.
Absolutely.
So I'm interested in your childhood and your first experiences with bipolar, and also how your diet ties into that. I'm curious what your diet was like when you were a kid.
Yeah, so I just had the basic standard American diet. You know, a meal with mashed potatoes and rolls, and dessert was ice cream. Lots of pizza, ramen noodles, tons of ramen noodles. Um, you know, it was pretty normal. I mean, we're from Southeast Missouri, so we definitely ate steak. We ate burgers, we ate meat. Wasn't really super vegetable heavy. I would eat it if they made me, but I never really enjoyed vegetables. I was a huge, like chocolate. I love chocolate, love donuts, love cakes, love, pies. Um, and as far as my experience with bipolar disorder in my childhood, I just realized very early that I just don't fit in. And that, like, we'd be sitting in a group, and everyone would be saying their thoughts, and I would say mine, and it would be like, you could hear a pin drop. And I was like, oh, okay, you guys aren't thinking the same way I'm thinking. Like, I realized very quickly that I was different. Um, and uh, I can't really say that I felt alone, because I don't really experience that emotion. I just knew that I didn't identify with anyone. Um, and then later, like once I hit puberty, oh my goodness, the mood swings and the emotions, and then the cloud, like it was just really, really dark. And I didn't have any childhood like abuse, or sexual abuse or anything like that. Um, from outside, everyone would say, "Oh, she had a really good child. I had a good school, good family." Um, but my experience, like I talk about the lens, I was seeing everything through the bipolar lens. And so everything was a tragedy. Like everything was horrible. And so my whenever I resolved the bipolar disorder, the circumstances in my life didn't change. My lens did. And so now I see everything from a different perspective. But yeah, that's pretty much how it was for me in childhood.
I can relate to that feeling of feeling different, not fitting in, and your thoughts being different than your peers, because I had the same thing. It's a terrible way to grow up. And then unfortunately for me, I did have some abuse. That's part of my story, unfortunately. And then it was around the time of puberty that I started dealing with intense anger and breaking things and punching holes in walls and things like that. And anger was like my most prominent symptom. And it still is to this day. All it takes is I could be doing really well and I could just have a cold or not sleep well. And then I'm going to be irritable and angry. That's the first thing that always comes up for me. Do you ever deal with any of that?
Um, no, for me personally, mine was like the textbook. The reason I knew I had bipolar disorder was impulsive decisions and risky behavior. And that obviously didn't start playing out until my 20s, until I got out of the home and went to college. And it was just really interesting. And then like I would get fired from jobs, and then I'd have failed marriages, plural. And just series of different relationships. always, like losing friends and stuff. So it was just this, I was just this really destructive tornado everywhere I went. And uh, thankfully, I didn't experience anger as much. It was more of the sadness that I experienced. That like, how come everybody else can have a normal life and I can't? And I didn't see that it was all of my decisions that I was making.
I see. I would have the sadness too, and I would have similar feelings like, why can't I be like everyone else? But then I would just get angry about it. That would be my first reaction, would be the anger. And yeah, the impulsive decisions, the irresponsible spending. It's the reason, I've got tattoos. Like, this started out as like a girl broke up with me and had a heart with a sword through it. And then I wanted to get rid of that. So I covered it, and it looked like a music note at one point. And then I added a bunch of stuff to it. It was all just so stupid. There would be times where I would wake up miserable and depressed and angry and just want to change something about myself to feel better. Like, well, I'm going to go get a tattoo because that sounds like a great idea. And here I am,
Exactly.
22 years old, and not realizing the permanence of it, or realizing and not even caring. Just, this is going to make me feel better for 5 minutes, so I'm going to go do it. How stupid is that?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, marriages, like, oh my gosh, like that's not something you just do. But I would do that, and I would just all of a sudden, move in with someone, or I would just, marry them, or like it would just be ridiculous. Or I would quit a job and not have another job. Or I would break a lease. Like I was just so erratic.
Yeah, and I'm laughing because I can just relate so well to what that's like. I remember one time in my early 20s, and I was buying stuff on eBay, and it was like eBay had just come out. I didn't really fully understand, like, oh crap, I just won this. Now I have to pay for it. But I was like into the bidding on it. I've never been into gambling, but like I was getting, I guess, dopamine hits from the bidding. And especially at the last couple of seconds, I ended up with a lot of things that I didn't really want. And I remember getting an overdraft statement from my bank, and I had never seen one of those. I'm like, I'm not really sure what this. I'm like, I wonder how far I can push this. So I was like, my competitive nature and being impulsive, how many overdraft notices can I get? So I just went and bought, like, I was into drums. And at the time I bought like all this percussion stuff on eBay just to see. And like over the couple of days, every time I got an overdraft notice, I was like all excited. I'm like, yeah, I got another one. How stupid and irresponsible is that?
Oh, absolutely. I remember in my freshman year of college, I was given a credit card. And I'm like, who would do that? Who would give a line of credit, $2,000 to a freshman in college? But anyway, they didn't know I was bipolar disorder. I had bipolar, and the credit card company gave it to me. My parents didn't know. And I went and bought clothes. I took all of my friends out to dinner. I was like, drinks on me. Like, it was just crazy, but I had no concept. Like, I had no ability to think about the next step. It was all right now and instant gratification.
And that's exactly it. Yeah, I remember getting cash advances on my credit cards and not realizing the interest I was paying. And even if I did realize, I didn't care. And I did the same thing. I wanted to be liked and wanted to be accepted. So I was buying things for my friends and trying to have them like me by giving them material things. It's so silly.
Yeah, been there.
When were you actually diagnosed as bipolar? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was 36.
So
No,
late in life.
no, 30. It was like 2011, 2012. So if I was 40 in 2019, gosh, I don't know. Do the math. um, but
But
in
late
my
in life,
30s,
pretty late in life.
yeah, yeah, because I didn't know. And it was ironic. I was actually diagnosed while I was in grad school, getting my master's in clinical counseling to be a therapist. And I was just like studying the DSM and all this stuff. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And that's me. Like, oh my gosh. And didn't know. But they say all the time that many people who go into psychology go in to fix themselves. And that definitely was. But honestly, I also feel that it makes me a better therapist because I'm not sitting there going, so how does that make you feel? I know how it makes you feel. I remember it sucks, and then I'm able to kind of like, come from the trenches with my clients. And it's a completely different experience. And I remember having a colleague who was like, I don't think it's good for you to share like your personal story with your clients and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, whatever. Like, I don't care what's appropriate. Like, they need help and they need to know that I understand their pain. I'm going to tell them, yes, I obviously have boundaries, but I'm going to tell them that as far as, you know, this is what's worked for me. This is what's helped me. That's what I'm going to do.
Absolutely. I think you'd be doing a disservice if you didn't share that. And if you were my therapist and you shared that, you'd probably be my favorite therapist ever.
That's what they say. That's what they say. They're always like, I've never had a therapist like you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but this is the way it should be. We're all humans and there's no rank. There's no like, I'm at the doctor level, and you're the little patient. Like, that's so stupid. That's honestly, I think that's just ego.
And up to that point in your mid 30s, you hadn't sought treatment for your impulsive behavior. You hadn't thought about the depression or anything, or no antidepressants, no psychotherapy of your own.
Nope. None. None until it hit a point where I couldn't function. And my first symptom that made me reach out for help was depression. Because the mania was fun, the mania was fine. It just was difficult for my family. I shouldn't say that. In 2001, I was hospitalized in a psych ward because I had psychosis. And psychosis is when you go into like an alternate reality and you start, hearing things and seeing things and saying things. Like I remember I was on the phone with my mom and she's in Missouri and I'm in Arizona. And I was scheduled. I had a plane ticket to go home in 3 weeks, and I said, Mom, I'm coming home. And she goes, I know, baby. I got your plane ticket. And I said, no. I said, I don't need a plane. I'm flying myself. And then she was like, okay. Like, and then she contacted a local friend and was like, can you go check on Emily? And I was totally in full blown psychosis. And they took me to the psych ward, thankfully.
Yeah, that's something I've never experienced. I've had other guests that have experienced psychosis, and in a wacky way, it sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like an acid trip. I did a lot of drugs in my time, and I wonder how like enjoyable it would be. I don't know. I know for me, it it makes me feel kind of grateful that I had the substance abuse issues, because that's what made me seek out treatment to begin with. Because I started smoking pot in my late teens. It was the only thing that ever made me feel normal and provided me relief, but I just couldn't control it. And I was just smoking all day long and then doing other drugs. So that got me into treatment. And then once I had my first stretch of sobriety for like 6 months and I felt the worst I had ever felt, is when they said, okay, well, now you've got this depression, this other thing. So that was my early 20s that I got introduced to that. And it was a couple of years later when I went back for drug treatment, and I wanted to unalive myself every day. And my sponsor from AA took me to another treatment. And then that's when they said, okay, you're bipolar and dual diagnosis and all this stuff. So I had an early introduction. That was like my mid 20s when I realized I had all this going on.
Yeah, yeah. My and that's when the unalive stuff really started happening to me was when I got the diagnosis. Because I was so down. I was so just there was no up and down. It was just down. And they started me on antidepressants. I mean, at my most, I was on 900 milligrams of lithium, 80 milligrams of Prozac, 80 milligrams of Adderall just to get out of bed every day. Like I could not wake up. I would have to set an alarm for 20 minutes before I had to wake up. And I'd set an alarm, pop the Adderall, go back to sleep, and then my other alarm would, and then I could get off the bed. But if I didn't have the Adderall, like one time they messed up my script and I didn't have Adderall for like 5 days, I had to call into work. I couldn't get out of bed. I literally could not get out of bed. And there's something wrong if your body and your brain cannot get out of bed without having 80 milligrams of Adderall. Like that's just not okay. And then, of course, I had to have Ambien to sleep every night because once I got up, I was jacked up on Adderall. And I wasn't functioning, I mean, I worked with that psychiatrist for 8 years, and everything that we tried, nothing was working. Until I started eating animal meat and animal fat, and I stopped eating ramen noodles and pizza and wine out of the box.
It sounds like a terrible existence, and I'm really sorry that you went through that. I know for me it was much of the same. I would take drugs here or psychiatric meds here and there, and sometimes they would help. Sometimes they would just take the edge off, which was all I needed. It wasn't until I got the bipolar diagnosis, and at the time, I never they never even mentioned lithium. They put me right on Lamictal, which is an anti seizure med, and for me, it took the edge off and actually made me feel decent. I felt okay. I didn't want to unalive myself anymore. I went from an emergent situation to where I was like, it was okay. But it gives me a lot of side effects, and it affects my thinking in these weird ways that I won't get into now that I don't like. And it affects my sleep, and it affects a lot of different things. But it can get me out of an emergent situation, but it's still a miserable way to live. And would I choose that over wanting to unalive myself every day? Well, sure, I would, but it's no way to live. And I don't wish that on anybody.
No, and you're right. I mean, the medications did work in that I stayed out of the psych ward and I did not take my life. So I am grateful for that. I am grateful that I was able to stick around until I discovered carnivore.
Before we get into carnivore and how you discovered it, I just want to maybe you can highlight some of your lowest points.
Definitely the losing jobs, getting fired from jobs, because it almost hurt them. Like, they were like, "We really like you, and on your good days, you're our best employee, but you're not consistent and you keep not doing what you need to do." And then the failed relationships, it was just so difficult to not be understood, and I how can I expect them to understand me when I don't understand me? And then not even knowing why I did certain things. Like I would hurt people with my words, with my actions. And I would almost kind of understand why they walked away. Um, and I really think the constant suicidal ideation was just this weird, uh, almost like a cancer of your thoughts. Like, you're just constantly not valuing the most amazing creation that you are. And you're just saying there's more bad than good, and you're not worth it. Like, you're just not worth it for your family. You're not worth it for your friends. You're not worth it for society. Like, just get out of here. Like, that self-hatred and just I would just depreciate myself, like, just think that I was not worthy. So I think that was probably the worst for me.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I spent a lot of my life feeling that way. And I feel terrible for you that you had to experience that. It's no way to live. And I'd have days where I would just wake up so angry and so miserably depressed as if I just found out, my mother passed away, but my mom's alive. She's fine. Like, there's no reason to feel the way I feel. And the depression with the massive anger on top of it, and not being able to control myself when I snap and I punch a hole through a wall and things like that, and just wanting to end that suffering, and my mind going to the place of, well, if I ended my life, then I end my suffering. And then I would go to the next step. I was like, well, I wonder how I would do it, or what would it be like if I did it? And immediately I knew it's not something I wanted to do, because I couldn't even come up, like, couldn't even formulate a plan, like, how would I do it? And then thinking about my family dealing with it. And it was, so that made it, I felt like that made it even worse because I kept romanticizing about it. Like, well, if I just wasn't around anymore, I wouldn't be suffering. But then as soon as I took that next step, it's like, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. But it was this recurring cycle, and it just would never end.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I hate whenever people can relate, because it's just like I know that you sat there in that darkness all alone, because there is nobody else that really, because anybody else who's experiencing that much darkness, they don't talk about it. And once they get out of it, a lot of people still don't talk about it. So it takes guts, for us to say that we've experienced these things, but it kind of doesn't, because we know the truth that there are millions, billions of people who have experienced these things. They just don't talk about it.
Right, that's correct. Yeah, it does. It does take some bravery to talk about it. Luckily, you and I are on the other side of things, and I was fortunate that at my worst time, I was heavily involved in AA, and I had a sponsor that I really loved and that I trusted. And it was after however many weeks in a row of me just waking up every weekend like I just don't want to be here anymore. He's like, all right, I had enough, and then he took me to treatment, and that's when I got the bipolar diagnosis and the anti seizure treatment and all that stuff. I was lucky that I had somebody in my life that I trusted and I was able to tell, and he was able to keep track of how I was doing. Not everybody has that, so I am grateful.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
All right, so let's talk about this carnivore thing. So I don't even really know this part of your story, how you initially discovered carnivore.
Yeah, so it was my brother. He was experiencing irritable bowel syndrome, and he started searching for a solution for him. And our whole family, my father, my brother, and I, we have studied Jordan B. Peterson for years. We have listened to many lectures. We've shared lectures with each other. Just really revered his work. And my brother heard from Jordan B. Peterson about Michaela Peterson. And eventually he found out about Amber O'Hearn. And he sent me the first chapter it was an audio book of Amber O'Hearn's book. And all I did was listen to that first chapter on February 23rd, 2019. And this knowing came over me, because I heard her story that she resolved bipolar disorder 10 years prior to that day. And I was like, you're telling me there's a chance? Like, I would do anything. And I've never heard somebody with that kind of a story to say that they've resolved it 10 years prior. And so I just jumped right in. And I've thanked my brother many times for saving my life, because not only did it resolve the bipolar disorder, it resolved the underlying multiple sclerosis. And then I lost 120 pounds, which was kind of cool too.
Wow.
Not the point. I didn't care about the weight. I was just trying to survive. Um, but yeah, so it was Amber O'Hearn, and then of course Michaela Peterson was my 4-minute mile for the autoimmune disease to just keep trekking. And so I'm super grateful. And then I think also my brother was convinced also with Dr. Sean Baker. So those four people really helped.
That's great. All people that were very important to my story as well. Amber O'Hearn, especially in the beginning, because you weren't hearing people talk about high fat really.
Yeah.
So at the point that I discovered her, it was probably 2020 maybe, and at that point I was already eating only meat and I was already getting beef fat from the butcher, and but you don't really hear that. And then when Michaela Peterson came out with her lion diet, it's essentially what I do. It's ruminant meat, salt and water only, but there's no focus on fat. They might be eating fatty cuts, but their total fat percentage is probably in the 60s, or if they're lucky in the low 70s. It's hard to do that with just steaks. There's no focus on fat there. For me, I was already doing the epilepsy level of the diet, like a 4-to-1 ratio or higher. So what I've come up with, my high fat beef only, is a combination of Michaela Peterson's lion diet with the epilepsy ratio of fat. And Amber was the first one I heard talking about eat animals mostly fat. And you don't hear people saying the mostly fat part. You hear the carnivore and you hear the animals and all that. And so I love that. And she also had her friend at the time, Sabone Huggins. Because
Oh, yes.
I
Yes,
remember
yes,
hearing
yes.
I remember hearing Amber, and then I remember hearing Sabone talking about some of the things that she would do with herself, and they would both say, eat your fat first to satiety until you feel full in the fat, and then you have your meat afterwards, and hopefully your body will end up regulating that way. And to this day, now this is going back 5 years, but to this day, I still will eat my fat first because of that. I do it now because I enjoy it, but it was because of those two that I started that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm so grateful, and I mean, a lot of the stuff that, you know, Amber O'Hearn gets into is, like, way over my head and scientific and everything, but I was just like, all I needed was that little nugget of, eat mostly fat, and that's what I did, I ate as much fatty animal meat as I could, and then eventually I realized I don't feel great on pork, I don't feel great on chicken. I realized that I feel best on beef, and then, I think it was so funny because I made a post of I realized that chicken was not for me, and that next week Michaela came out with the lion diet, and I was like, me too. I was like, yes, like it was just confirmation. And that's my happy spot. Like that's where I feel best.
Same for me. And it's interesting. You and I got to the same destination by following a different path, but we both got there. And I'm the same way. I still will eat pork and chicken at times.
Yeah,
I At times, sometimes it can be like a little bit of a treat, especially I've been doing this raw thing for a while now, and I do every once in a while want some cooked food. Samantha, my daughter, really enjoys us eating together. So, and she really likes chicken. So I'll do like leg quarters or thighs, and I'll cook them. She likes drumsticks too, but I'm not gonna eat raw chicken because I just think that's disgusting.
yeah. I've
It's not.
never
It's
done
not.
that.
No, it's not appealing. So I will barbecue some chicken every once in a while and have that with her. But I do notice right away that even just going from raw to cooked, I don't feel my best. And then going from all beef to chicken or to pork, I don't feel my best at all.
Yeah, I would love to get back to raw. I did not intentionally go off raw. I ate raw beef and beef fat for, like, when you saw that video, for like 3.5 years, and I was thriving. Like I just felt so amazing on it. I didn't feel deprived. I didn't feel like I would go out to eat with my family, and I would have like a steak, and then afterwards I couldn't wait the next day to get back to my raw. Like it just, oh, like it was almost a visceral response when I would get that raw beef and beef fat. And then I had this random sickness for 6 days. Couldn't eat, couldn't drink, nothing for 6 days. And when it was over, I was like, okay, we can get back. And could not swallow any raw meat or raw fat. I have tried to reintroduce it at least a dozen times. And every time I literally can't even chew it in my mouth and I can't even swallow it. And I'm just like, what is this? Like, I have no idea. But I still have a dream. And I still know that if I ever get an opportunity to, I'm going back to raw because it's so easy. You don't have to have dishes and cook. And I am lazy and I love how simple eating raw is.
It sounds so weird because for me, I find it much easier to chew and swallow when it's raw. And when I go to cooked, or if I have a steak and I throw it on the grill, I'm just going to sear both sides. So I'm going to get that barbecue flavor. It's still mostly raw. But the times that I've had, like when I make pot roast for my wife and daughter, I mean, that's like fully cooked. I don't even want that in my mouth. It's just so dry and I have a hard time swallowing it. I had a cooked burger over the summer that was like a pretty medium, well done burger. And that too was like, it did not feel good chewing it. I could not swallow it and I could not wait to have some raw. One of the things I like about the raw is that it just goes down so easily.
Yeah, I definitely want to get back. It wasn't that it was hard to chew or eat, it was a gag. I had this crazy gag reflex and I'm like, where did this come from? 3.5 years? And then all of a sudden, and so I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna listen to my body. I'm just gonna go with the flow. I'm not gonna force anything because I never forced myself to do raw. That came organically. Like I just wanted it. And so I'm not going to force myself to stay there if my body's done healing. I don't know.
Those are very important messages that you're putting out there for our audiences to listen to your body. and follow the path and don't force anything. I do a lot of fasting too. I don't force the fasting. There are times where I say I'm going to do a 72 and then sometimes I can't make it. Like, okay, I know the difference when I'm really hungry and when I need to eat. And it's the same thing with the raw. I didn't wake up one day and say, I think I'm just going to try eating raw. It was a slow transition over really years. In the very beginning, when I started eating all meat, I was a vegetarian and a vegan for 20 years. And then I added meat back in. And then a couple years later, I lowered my carbs to lose weight. And then I ended up, the less plants and the more meat I ate, the better I felt. And then I started adding the beef fat to it. But my meat was extremely well done, like way overcooked in the beginning. And then I discovered sous vide. You familiar with sous vide cooking?
Yeah.
I discovered the sous vide. And what I liked about that was even though it's fully cooked, it can come out like it's raw. It's pretty much like it's real pink and it's great. I loved it. So I did that for years. Even all my beef fat I was sous videing. And then I got away from that and I would just kind of pan sear things, lightly cook them. But there'd be times where maybe I was really hungry or maybe like I was feeling lazy or I was in a rush or whatever. And I would just eat a couple of bites of my meat and my fat as I was preparing it. And I just noticed like I really enjoyed it. It just felt good. Like, oh, it's interesting. It's weird because a beef doesn't really have a lot of, especially if it's conventionally raised beef. It doesn't have a lot of flavor when it's raw. So it wasn't the flavor that I was enjoying. I thought maybe it was even the fact that it was a little bit cold because that was different than eating warm meat. But I just really enjoyed it. So every once in a while, I would have a couple of bites. And then I started noticing that I really liked the fat raw. And now I'm eating a large pile of beef fat almost every day. And I really liked it raw. So for a couple of months, I was eating my fat raw and I was still cooking my meat. And I just slowly went that way. And then I got to a point this past summer where I was already like 90% raw. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to commit to this and see what happens. And let me just do 2 weeks of raw and see how it feels and then go back to, and then, so that's what I like to do is I like to experiment and kind of follow my body. But I think that's an important message for everyone is don't force it and to listen to your body.
Absolutely, because we have that inner clarity. We have that inner knowing. That's our GPS. And that's what happens is whenever we override our central nervous system, we start to like short circuit, and it's much better whenever you do it as a team and you're listening to your body and you're responding to your body instead of just like, no, you're going to do this and we're going to do this for 50 days. And we're like, chill out, dude. Like, not the way, not the way.
I feel lucky in a way that the way that I discovered all this was all kind of by accident. I remember in the beginning, like I said, I lowered my carbs to lose weight. I lost 50 pounds. I was overweight and miserable and everything. And I heard Vinny Tortorich talking about the carnivore diet, and just I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. I don't see how people could just eat meat all day. But the idea always stuck in my mind. But it wasn't like I woke up and said, well, I'm going to try carnivore. It's the same thing with the fasting. I went from 6 meals a day to 2 meals a day to one big meal a day, just feeling my best. I didn't know there was a thing called OMAD. It wasn't like I woke up and said, oh, I'm just going to start trying OMAD, you know? But today it can be confusing. I have a lot of friends and I have people online that I'm trying to help and they'll be like, yeah, I'm going to try OMAD today. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's something you just try. I mean, you got it. Like you should work up, like do like I did. I naturally worked up to it.
Yes.
I'm grateful that I didn't even know these things existed back then. I just found them all by following my path.
Yeah. And for me personally, it has opened me up spiritually so much. I mean, because all the religions of the world, utilized fasting as a tool. And so the mental clarity that I get in those moments is just so beautiful. And the fact that it happens like organically, like it's just it's fasting has become my superpower. Like absolutely my superpower. I can even dry fast. I've dry fasted for 3 days and I had to work up to that. I had to have a coach, but whenever I got there, it was so freeing to know that. And I know this sounds kind of dark, but to know that even if I got thrown into a concentration camp and I was deprived of food and I was deprived of water, that my spirit and my soul is still intact and whole, and that I can sustain life. And to know that I'm not dependent on something was just, it was so freeing.
That what you just said there, that last thing I can really relate to because it's the dependence that's been a big problem in my life with substance abuse, and I was dependent on pot for so long, and dependent on so many different things in my life to feel better and to find relief, and that's what I love about fasting is that it is extremely liberating. And I was going to ask you about dry fasting because that's something I saw Amber O'Hearn talking about recently. I,
Really?
yeah, if you follow her on X, she's been talking about it a bunch lately. There's a website called the Dry Fasting Club that I went on and got some information. I've known about dry fasting, but it's just not something I was ever really that interested in because I hear that it's like people that are trying to really aggressively heal things, and that's not what I'm looking to do. I look at fasting as I've said this before. It's like a car wash for my brain, and my brain is like my car and it's being stored outside and it's getting rained on and pooped on by birds and all that. And I like to wash it once a week to keep my car nice and shiny and clean. So that's what I like to do with my brain. We usually fast on Sundays. Me and a couple of my friends that are in Discord. We have a Discord group for it, and I like to fast once a week. And I find it just keeps me really fresh. A lot of times over the years, like if I had a college exam coming up, I would fast the day before, or if I have something important going on, I would fast the day before because I know that I'm going to wake up feeling my best. And it's extremely liberating. Recently, we went to Disney. We were very fortunate that our family members were generous and they gave us enough money because we couldn't afford to go to Disney on our own. And we were able to take Samantha when she's only 8 years old and still really deep into all the magic of Disney. And the whole experience was surreal for me because everywhere you go, just through the airport and the plane, it's like people are constantly putting something in their mouth. Even if it's just a bottle of water, everybody's carrying a bottle of water with them. People have these big giant jugs that they're bringing through security, and then they're filling them up at the bottle station. And constantly through Disney, it's everywhere you go. People are always putting something in their mouth. And I stuck to what I do. I brought a whole bunch of raw beef fat with me. I brought a bunch of raw meat, and I was still only eating once a day. So I'm spending 99% of my time not putting something in my mouth, and just amazed, especially like when you're in the terminal for the plane and you see people stuffing their faces, and then you get on the plane and they're stuffing like for the whole plane. It's a 2-hour plane ride, and they're stuffing their faces for the whole time. And here I am. I don't have water. I don't have food, and I could care less. I am good to go.
Yeah. It's really, it says a lot because it's almost like we have like an oral fixation. Like we feel that this is life, that I am getting energy, I am getting sustenance, I am getting, and the one thing that baffled me the most whenever I did the 3-day dry fast and even working up to that was I was thinking that I was going to be dehydrated and that I was going to have like, dry mouth or dry eyes or whatever. But what I found was that my body makes its own water. And I was like, oh, so I'm actually depriving my body of doing its function if I'm constantly sitting here chugging water all day, every day. I'm actually messing up the balance of my technology, of my human body. And I need to kind of like let it do its thing sometimes. And so I think you're so right to do it like once a week and get into that.
And I just started the dry thing literally just in the last couple of weeks, and I'm finding it to be a lot more powerful than regular fasting. Part of my issue is dealing with severe cramps ever since I had COVID in 21. And I'm still to this day trying to figure out electrolytes and water and all that. So I was worried with doing dry fasting it was going to affect me, but it hasn't. And I had the one fast recently that was about a 72. I did the first 36 or so dry, and then I had a 96 that I did the first 24 dry. That's how I see other people doing it. Is like if you're going to do a multi-day fast, you do the first one dry, and it's it's been really cool. The quick weight loss that you can get from it is really cool. Just it's added another level of what's the word I'm looking for? Just like confidence, I guess, like self confidence. That I mean, I can go 24 hour, or I can go 30 something hours without not just not eating, but not even drinking anything. And I'm a very active person, so I'm still like putting in my workouts, or I'm going for long walks. I'm feeling great from it. It's been really, really awesome.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I love it. Like you said, it wasn't something that you forced. It was something organic, and it's fun to really push the limits of our body and to know, what can I do? And if I can do this, what more can I do?
Yeah, it has been fun because I did so much self experimentation over the years to get myself to the high fat beef only. And then, I add stuff back in, and that chapter's closed. I can tell you every single food item that I'm going to react to and exactly what it's going to do to me because I've tested it multiple times. And I thought that that chapter of my life of experimenting was going to be completely closed too. It's just different now. Now I'm experimenting with the raw thing for a couple of months, and it's been interesting to add cooked meats back in and see how that makes me feel. And now I'm experimenting with the dry fasting as well. There's just something about it I love. I love the challenges. I love looking forward to these things and experimenting and seeing how they work and tinkering. And the dry fasting now has added another level that I never thought that I would. I thought I was kind of done with all this stuff, but I have these extra things I can experiment with. It's really cool.
Yeah, it really is. I love it. I love, for me personally, just unlocking more more joy and more clarity. Like I said, like that connection that I'm getting to God, spirit, source. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Like I am just amazed at all that I am discovering in the spiritual realm, because I think that, the physical realm, it has been so dense for me that it feels so nice to experience that kind of that peace and that calm, and to just push the limit on new levels.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I could just sit here and talk to you about this stuff for hours, but I want to try to get back to
Yeah, no problem.
I want to get back to your story. You wanted to transition to a carnivore diet from your brother. What was your diet like right before you did that?
Ramen noodles, pizza, cakes, ice cream, beer, wine out of the box. Um, and I had to eat every 2 to 4 hours or I was hangry. Like I was just like not okay. I would even have like a container of icing on my nightstand so that if I woke up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, I could like eat a couple tablespoons and then go back to bed. It was intense sugar.
Sounds not much different from the way you described your childhood diet, except for the box wine.
Yeah,
Sounds very standard American diet, and it sounds delicious. Who wouldn't love what you were eating?
just pure misery.
So, how did you make the transition?
So, bipolar was my gift or my superpower in that moment as well. Um, because I'm a very all or nothing kind of a person, and so I jumped into the deep end. I do not recommend people do this, because obviously I ended up in the hospital, because I I went through the transition so quickly. But for me, that was the way. If I had tiptoed in and barely had some resolve, the next bipolar cycle, I probably would have been jumping ship. I'd been like, I quit. But because I jumped in so quickly, and I literally, my very first day, I reported to my brother. I was like, "Hey, this. It was all meat, animal meat and animal fat. That's all it was. No dairy, no eggs, no vegetables, no nothing. And I had 1 tablespoon of honey." And he goes, "Why the honey?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he goes, "Don't do that." And I was like, "Okay." And then that was it. So I literally, that was my only cheat ever on carnivore, was 1 tablespoon of honey there. And then I was able to maintain just animal meat and animal fat. And I mean, I can't even, I think maybe 3 years in, I started to, throw in a sweet potato or, other stuff. Um, because I just felt so good eating fatty animal meat. And then, like I said before, I was able to get out the pork. I noticed I didn't feel as well on the pork. I didn't feel as well on the chicken. I didn't feel bad on fish. It just was like a snack to me. Like it just didn't satiate me. And then I stuck with just beef and beef fat pretty much the same time that Michaela came out with a lion diet.
How did you feel when you ate pork and chicken compared to beef?
Um, so chicken was emotional. I was irritable. I was eating, I was on food stamps. So I was eating out of the grocery store. So I'm sure it was just like riddled with hormones, and horrible, like a feedlot kind of stuff. Like it was not the best chicken, not the best meat, not the best pork at all. And so the chicken was I was very emotional every time I would eat chicken. Like I would just snap and just feel angry. And then with the pork, I just felt uneasy, like nauseous. Every time I ate pork, I would just feel nauseous. And I'm just like, okay, note to self, like I'm not responding well to these things. And then the fish, I was just still hungry. It just wasn't satiating. And fish is expensive.
Yeah, so it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting that chicken could make you irritable or snap. That's funny.
Yeah. It was the hormones in the chicken.
I get that way from a lot of other food items, but not from chicken. I'll get that way from dairy for sure. And all these things that I'm going to list, they'll give me skin issues first. I'll get some kind of skin issue. I will get skin issues from chicken and pork if I eat it enough. Cocoa butter is one.
Really?
And that's unfortunate because it's 100% fat, so it fits the high fat portion of my diet. Yeah, and I love it. I drank bulletproof coffee for many years, and I would put cocoa butter in it, and I used to make like fat bomb treats and stuff with cocoa butter. But yeah, that will irritate my skin, and that will make me very irritable and angry. Yeah, yeah, dairy and that. So what I've noticed with chicken and pork is that like if I'm eating beef for a while and then I introduce chicken, I would say that on beef only, my digestion is as perfect as it can get. And right away, what I'll notice from chicken is that I'm burping, I have gas, and I'm also pooping more than I'm used to. And same thing with pork. I think pork is even a little bit worse, especially if it's very, very like if I make like a pork butt, if I make pulled pork for my wife and daughter, when it's very, very cooked pork, it's even worse. I'm burping a lot, and it'll be like, I had my meal at 12 o'clock, and here it is 10 o'clock at night, and I'm trying to go to sleep, and I'm still burping up pork. That doesn't happen to me on beef.
No.
No.
And I noticed eggs make me fart. And
Yes.
I'm just like, I just don't enjoy farting, you know? And I don't need eggs. Like I just don't feel like they really hit the spot for me. Like
No, I
sometimes I
feel the
feel a
same
little
way.
queasy.
I feel the same way about eggs. I don't enjoy them, and they do bother me. They bother my digestion. And it's funny because as a guy, farts are funny. I think farts are probably more funny to guys than girls. And a vegetarian and vegan for 20 years, I dealt with a lot of farts. So I thought it was normal to just have gas all day long. But then if you go a couple of weeks or a couple of months without it, and then all of a sudden you have something like if you have some pork and you start farting again, it's very uncomfortable. It's not fun. You don't enjoy it at all. You can't laugh about it.
No, not at all. And those when you get those like bubbles in your gut, like it's just like, like I didn't realize how good it feels to not feel your digestion.
Right, and that's how I would explain transitioning into raw for me has been. It's that next level of I don't even feel at all. I don't feel it at all. Like I could eat a pound of beef fat and a half a pound of meat and it's raw. And within 5 minutes, I don't even feel like I ate. I went from hungry to not hungry anymore. And I don't do this, but I could go lift weights, I could go run, I could do whatever I want. If I'm doing that on cooked food, it's going to sit heavier in my stomach for sure. I'm going to feel it. It's going to be maybe 2 hours or so before I feel like I didn't eat. It's a big difference. And it's interesting because a couple of times that I've experimented and added in cooked meat, I will notice every once in a while, like, oh, I just burped, or I get a little bit of gas from like, is this just from having cooked meat now? This is what's going on with me. It's interesting to see this next level of things like, wow, it's cooked meat. It's beef still, or it's lamb. It's still ruminants, but it's still taking my digestion down a notch. Initially, I'm like, well, that kind of stinks because I guess I'm not really having that much cooked meat. But then I realize on the bright side, I've reached a new level. I've gotten up to a higher level to wow, I've really leveled up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever I was eating raw and I would have a meal, it was always that heaviness, like it's heavy and greasy feeling in my stomach. And like you said, right whenever you ate an entire meal of raw, you're just like settled, you know? Yeah. And another reason why it's so frustrating for me now because I know how good it was. And I'm like, I want to go back. Like, why are we here? But I'm letting my body do what it needs to do. I'm still reintroducing it. I'm still trying all the time, and I'm like, can we go back now? Can we go back now?
It'll happen. You just got to keep trying.
Yeah, I know it will.
How long were you doing carnivore before you started transitioning to raw?
Um, I ate cooked my whole first year, so it was a year in. I started just wanting it more and more rare. Every time I would cook a steak, I just wanted it more and more rare. And my burger, I wanted it more and more rare. And then I finally was just like, I wonder if I could just eat it raw. And then the fat was actually an Instagram follower. I was cutting up fat before I cooked it, and I was showing a post or whatever, and this Instagram follower said, "Have you ever tried it raw?" And I was like, "Oh, that's funny, cute, uh-huh." And a week later, she messaged me again. She was like, "So did you try it raw?" And I was like, no, I didn't. And then finally, she was like, "Just put it in your mouth. Just try it raw." And I was like, "Fine. Oh my gosh." And so I tried it, and I was like, and I had this visceral response of bliss. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "This is so creamy. This is so delicious. This hit the spot." So I had to send her a message. I even made posts and tagged her in it. And I was like, "Sis, like, thank you. You totally opened up a whole new world for me." And then I didn't stop. Like, I just kept eating raw fat. And it was so amazing that I could get more fat than I did cooked. I could get it more in raw. And that helped me so much with, just my mood.
That's interesting. I noticed one thing that happened for me over the years is I used to, when I started out eating the fat, I used to do like a lot of people do, and I would air fry it and make it super crispy,
Yeah.
really overcooked and crispy. And I'll still do that sometimes for Samantha. And if I try eating that I cannot tolerate that anymore. That will give me
No.
gas. Even when I make my own homemade tallow and you have all those crispy bits that are left over, I used to save all that and eat it. I can no longer eat that. That is actually worse for me now than having chicken or pork. I just cannot even digest it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way. I can't do that. I mean, I can do it if it's cooked on a steak, but I can't do like those. I used to do those crispy bits and I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, no. Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard anybody else say that before.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know what it is. It literally gags me. Like it's like greasy.
Yeah, and I just get like terrible indigestion from it and I'll get gassy and everything. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. I feel nauseous.
This is really cool. I feel like I'm talking to myself.
I love it. That's great.
It sounds like your path to raw was really just like mine. You had a little bit and you describe it as bliss. And I would just describe it as, for me, when I am not well, my default state is to be irritable and angry.
Mm,
And anything that makes me feel happy and calm, I consider that to be the exact opposite. So I would notice that I would be eating a couple pieces of raw meat and fat, and I would just feel happy. It's the same reason that I walk around my neighborhood barefoot. I've been barefoot for a couple of years, and it's just the best way I can describe it is that it makes me happy. Yesterday in my town, we went to our town's Christmas parade, and it had been, I don't know, 30 degrees or something for the last 10 days. It's been so cold out. Yesterday was 55. It felt like summer. So I did like I normally do. I wore shorts and I was barefoot, and I'm the only idiot out there walking around in shorts and barefoot. Everybody else is bundled up, and my mom was mortified. And we were having a conversation, but she's like, "Can't you just do that in the summer?" I'm like, "Ma, you don't understand. This is like medicine for me. It makes me happy." It's the same reason that I'm in my porches trying to sunbathe. It's 35 degrees out, but it's 85 in the porch, and I'm trying to get my sun. It's like medicine. And it was the same thing when I first started eating the raw fat. It just makes me feel happy. And anything that makes me feel happy and calm and it's free and it's not hurting me in any way and there's no side effects, I'm going to do it. It's going to become part of my regimen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that was in I did an interview with Sarah Kleiner Wellness in way back in the day, and we talked about carnivore being the gateway drug, because once you get into carnivore and you get your inflammation reduced in your brain, then you start realizing all these other things. And then I started grounding, and then I started getting the morning sunlight in my eyes, and it just keeps getting better. Like, it's just so incredible, all the different things that we're just like, oh, what else can we do? How much healthier can we be?
Right. And you can really start going down the rabbit hole. So I don't know where you're at with EMFs, but we are a Wi Fi free household. I haven't had Wi Fi on since February.
That's amazing. That's impressive.
I'm sitting at my computer station right now, and I have wires run here, and I have wires run around the house for our like our iPads and our iPhones. We'll hook them up to a wired connection instead, and then avoiding plastics and avoiding polyester. I'm wearing all cotton clothing, and Samantha's mostly in cotton. She's like 90% cotton. Her sheets and her most of her clothes and everything. Like, you could just keep going and going and going.
I love it. I love it. It's a beautiful rabbit hole.
So let's talk about what benefits you started experiencing with your bipolar when you went on to this meat only diet. What did you notice right away?
Um, so I started February 24th of 2019. My last manic or depressive episode was April of 2019. So that's crazy, like how fast that was. But I what the everything from that point to that point was a progression. And I remember one day, I think it was probably like the end of the third week or something, I don't know, around there, like about a month in, I experienced this glimpse of hope. And it was just 10 minutes, but it was so foreign to me. Like, I hope, what is that? Like, joy? What is that? Like, it was so foreign. And I remember after it ended, I was like, huh. I was like, that was crazy. And then the next day, it was 15 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's back. It's back. It's back. And then it went away. But then it just gradually got more and more and more until now, like, I can't have a bad day. Like, I could have a flat tire, I could, like, uh, spill food, I could have an argument with my spouse, my husband, I could have my kid not listening to me, I could have a best friend lie about me, like, and I'm just like, "Huh." I'm like, "Okay, it'll be interesting to see how this turns out." Like, I'm experiencing hope and experiencing joy, experiencing peace that passes all understanding. So that was pretty much my symptoms of how it changed for me.
I am so happy for you. What you're describing is very similar to how I've been experiencing life the past couple of years. And after all the suffering that you and I have gone through, I think we deserve it. And I'm just really so happy for you that you found this.
Absolutely. I mean, it sucked to go through the darkness, but I actually am grateful for the darkness now because of all the clients that I get to help. Like, I met with this 20 something, early 20s new client, and she had never heard of me. Her parents forced her to meet with me. And she was like, who are you? And I was like, you haven't heard my story? And she was like, no. And so I told her my story. And within 10 minutes, she goes, you're me. You're me. I get to be you. I get to be like that. And I was like, yeah, sis, like, I got you. Like, I'm gonna help you. And then within 2 months, she was like working full time and thriving. And she was like, Emily, you changed my life. And I was like, you changed your life because you made the decisions to work with me, to let me in. But I'm so grateful now for the darkness that I'm able to, it's like my ticket in with people, that they're like, that's my qualification forget my master's degree. That has nothing to do with it. My qualification for helping people out of the darkness is to go, I was here and now I'm here. That says more to me than any credential.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wish there was somebody around like you, but like 20 years ago. I could have used you back then. Where were you?
Yeah, I help a lot of people right out of the psych ward. And that's
That's
my
great.
favorite. And right out of prison.
That's great. And so what kind of message are you giving these people? Are besides being able to provide hope, are you telling them that it's lifestyle strategies, it's diet? Are you telling them that right off the bat?
Yeah, I won't work with people if they're not willing to talk about food.
I
There's
love it.
just no point. I did that in my practice, at the private practice I was working at. It was like Groundhog Day because they just keep coming back with the same thing every week. All this problem, everything's horrible, 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 and they're like elbow deep in a bag of Doritos, sipping on a big gulp. And I'm like, okay, well, let's try this strategy. And they're like, huh? Like their eyes are glassed over. Like I'm literally wasting my breath to talk to anybody who is in the throes of inflammation. And so if you're not willing, I don't need you to go carnivore. I don't need you to go raw. I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to remove the sugar and the processed foods. Then we can talk. And then I noticed that then they're like, oh, I don't have this problem anymore. And I'm like, okay. So it's not that we need to go in and have talk therapy about so many different things. It's that we need to triage first, remove the inflammation from your brain, and then we can go into, that you were raped at the age of 7 or, whatever other thing. I'm not trying to discount that. I'm just trying to say, let's start at this foundation first.
This is so amazing. I love how you're doing this. It really is, and I like that you specify that you're not asking people to go carnivore or to go raw. Just because it's what you did or what works for you, doesn't mean it's for everyone. And I say the same thing. I have a lot of people that I'm helping. They're like, "Well, I can't do what you do," and I'll say, "Well, but I'm not asking you, and you don't have to do what I do. I got here on my own path. I didn't wake up one day and say I'm just going to try this high fat beef only thing. I'm doing it because it's what I found works best for me." And for most people, and especially people that are not even really suffering from severe psychiatric conditions, if they remove sugar, if they removed processed foods, seed oils, or if they tried Vinnie Tortorich's no sugars, no grains, very simple changes could make a really huge difference in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, big difference. And I really think that that's where we need to start the conversation and let them go on their own journey. They will discover, just like we did, hey, I feel best when I just eat this. And let them do that. And I think it's more important that they know that they have that power to do their own experiment.
When I was first diagnosed with depression, it was described to me as a mountain that I had to climb. I was in my early 20s and I went 6 months sobriety, no pot, and felt the worst I'd ever felt. And they said, "Well, you've got this small little mountain here of this substance abuse. Now you've got this big mountain of depression you got to get over." And the way it was described was like, "Well, it's going to be there and you're going to need to take pills." And then it was the same thing when I got diagnosed with bipolar a couple of years later. It's a lifelong condition. You're going to need to take medicine for the rest of your life. And I knew, even though some of the medicines somewhat worked some of the time, that it was really no way to exist, and it just felt like a death sentence. And if somebody had told me back then, well, you can do things with your diet and your lifestyle that are going to help you, that would have gotten me through the tough times. It would have provided me hope, and it would have set me on the path 20 years earlier. So I'm really happy for you and for all your patients, for everybody that you're getting help, because you're making an amazing difference.
Yeah, it's so honestly, it's really selfish because as a therapist, it was like Groundhog Day. Like it was so boring because nobody was getting better. And now, like I literally watch people transform before my very eyes. Like we communicate through an app called Marco Polo, and it's video messaging. And so we can even like flip through the videos and be like, look, this was you 2 months ago. Can you believe this? And like their thought process, their word, they're not able to like pull words in and everything. And then at the end of 2 months working with me, they're like sharp, and they're like seeing their own problems. They're solving their own problems. And I'm like, Oh, I love it. Because as a therapist, like, it's the model is almost that you like need them to continue to depend on you for years and years and years. And with this, my goal is for you to not need me and for you to go be on your own.
Set them free.
Yeah,
That's amazing. It must be so rewarding.
it is.
That's
It is.
great.
It's my favorite addiction now is helping people.
All right. So we were in the part of your story where you started carnivore. We know what it did for your bipolar. And then about a year in, you started raw. And then it was after that when you got the MS diagnosis. Is that correct?
Nope. I got hospitalized 3 weeks into carnivore. And so a logical person would say, I started this all meat diet and now I can't swallow. And then I got the MRIs and I was like, and now I have lesions on my brain. And then eventually I couldn't walk. And so thankfully I had that inner knowing that was just like, nope, this is inflammation. And if you think about it, what's going on with MS is that you have a deteriorated myelin sheath on your nerves. And that myelin sheath is made out of fat. And so I'm like, if I need fat for my brain, I need fat for my myelin sheath. I'm just going to keep eating fat. And I did. And then my last MS symptom was May 9th of 2019. So started February 24th. And then May 9th was my last MS symptom. I've been able to do CrossFit. I've been able to walk. Like I don't have to tell my feet to not drop. And of course, I don't have a delayed, speech, and I can swallow.
Okay. So that's amazing. I'm really glad you clarified the timeline there. So your bipolar cleared up within the first 2 months, and then your MS was still in the first couple of months. It was all at the same time that you were healing up.
That's why I wouldn't believe my story if it didn't happen to me. It's crazy. I have Dr. Anthony Chafee just emailed me and he was like, "Can you be a part of my study and send me your MRIs and stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like it's crazy."
As far as the lesions on your brain, are they still there? Have they shrunken or disappeared or anything?
No, within the first MRI was March, and then the second MRI was April, and it my lesion had reduced by 50%.
Wow.
Yeah. And then now my last MRI showed no new MS activity.
Interesting. That is amazing.
But I don't play. I don't have cake for my birthday. I
Right.
don't, have a soda every once in a while. I don't it's animal meat and animal fat, and that's it.
Wow. So one of my previous guests, Brett Smith, he talked about reversing his heart disease and lowering his CAC score. Now you're talking about shrinking brain lesions. It's just amazing the power of diet and what can happen when you eat a species appropriate diet, what your body can do, what your body's capable of doing to heal itself.
Absolutely. So fun.
Yeah, it is. All right. So now, so it was your MS and your bipolar had resolved, and it was a couple months later that you got into raw, and then you did that for a couple of years. But then you had your second sickness, which is what prevented you from eating raw. How long ago was that?
A year.
It's been a year. Okay.
A year that I've been eating cooked. And I keep trying to go back. I'm gonna go back, darn it. I'll message you as soon as I do. I'll be like, I had a full meal.
Yay.
'Cause I'll get like 3 bites in, and then this gag reflex starts, and I can't. And I'm just like, "Why?"
Tell me about what you're eating, your meals. Like, what is your frequency like? How many times a day are you eating?
Again, I just kinda listen to myself. I do enjoy fasting. So sometimes it's, water fast, sometimes it's dry fast. Um, Pretty much, the most I will eat is 2 meals in one day. Most. But most of the time it's just OMAD. Most of
Okay.
the time it's just 1 meal a day. Ground beef, ribeyes, um, uh, steaks, roast. I'll cook the roast in the Instant Pot, cook it, pretty much it, and then water.
Is all your meat fully cooked? Like your ground beef and your roast and everything is all fully cooked?
Mhm. Yep,
Really?
yep. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that. Um, my ground beef, if I just brown it in it like a skillet with like butter, it's all cooked. But if I have a burger, it'll be like raw in the middle, or, and then if I have a steak, it'll be raw in the middle.
And that you're tolerating okay.
Yeah, like I said, I know best. So I remember how that felt. I'm okay. Like, I'm good. I'm getting through every day with my digestion and everything, but I remember it feeling like supernatural.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely amazing.
Are
Uh,
you are you adding any fat to your meals like you used to?
no, I like the butter, the ribeyes, like the chuck roast and stuff like that. Um, uh, but beyond that, no. I do have bone broth, so I'll add that to it sometimes.
Do you ever track your food?
No,
No, you've never?
no. The only time I ever tracked my food was all the dang interviews. Everybody wanted to know, what are my ratios? How much am I eating and everything? Like, if it wasn't for interviews, I never would know.
Okay.
But everybody kept asking me. And so I finally was like, fine, this is what I'm eating. And I'd have to measure it. But it's different every day. So, I really don't know. I just listen to my body.
It sounds like from what you're describing, your fat is probably like in the high 60s or low 70s, most likely. And you don't
But
have
when it was raw, it was way up there.
it was higher than that, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have a problem with butter, it doesn't bother you?
No, I actually did not include it until I started eating cooked. And so I was really worried about that, because my whole first 4 years or so, like, I just didn't have uh, any butter. And then I added it in because I knew I needed more fat in that ground beef, and I was like, I really would like some more fat, and so that was the easiest way for me to add in some fat.
I was big on the butter in the beginning. When I went to all meat, I discovered pretty quickly that it was not good for me, that I would get very irritable and angry if I didn't have more fat. This was before I discovered beef fat. I didn't know that existed. And so I would melt butter and dip my meat in it. I would eat a lot of butter. And then when I discovered the beef fat, I just liked that so much more that I dropped the butter. And I remember going like 30 days or maybe even longer without butter. And then I had been thinking about it and kind of fantasizing about it. And then when I went back to it, I did not enjoy it at all. It tasted sour. I didn't
Wow.
like how it tasted. And what I noticed right away was I got skin issues. I get like a particular kind of pimple on my forehead from it. And then after having it for a couple of days, I got irritable and angry again. And I've tried to reintroduce several times, but because I don't really enjoy it that much, it's not even worth it. And I've tried dairy a bunch of times. I've tried raw cheeses, I've tried hard and soft cheeses, and it all does the same thing. It usually will ignite cravings in me as well.
Yeah.
That was a big problem because still have very poor impulse control. And anything that makes me crave to the point where I'm going to bed thinking about it, I'm waking up thinking about it, and I can consume these items even when I'm not hungry. Like cheese, I could just eat a pile of cheese even when I'm not hungry. Items like that, they have to be removed. They have to go.
I'm the same way. Absolutely the same way, because I experience food freedom, where you're not sitting there white knuckling it and, like, not, you know, or resisting the messages that are coming from the refrigerator. Like, the food literally talks to me. Like, I will be totally in the middle of something else, and I'll just hear, "You have cheese in the refrigerator. You have, sour cream. You have this in the refrigerator." And I'm like, and I never have a steak talk to me. Steak's never like, "Hey, I'm in the refrigerator waiting for you." Like, I have food freedom. Like, I'm literally in my office doing work. I don't need to be hearing from the refrigerator what's going on. So that food freedom is everything to me, and that's why I stay away from a lot of foods. Is that they especially dairy, like, it hits that dopamine center in your brain, and I just don't want to. I don't want to play that game anymore.
I love the way you describe that, and I'm just emotional just to even hear you say that because I know exactly what you're saying, and I don't hear many people saying this. I feel like I'm talking to myself, and yeah, it's like that voice you hear, and it's calling you. And I've had that with so many different items over my life, with substances, with drugs, and with all different kinds of foods. And I have never had I would say I've never had fat do that to me. I have had steaks do that to me. I have had meat do that to me. Um, and I've noticed that I will have this is why I aim to keep my fat percentage at or above 90% on most days, because if I eat too much meat, I will lose my edge. And if I have too much meat for too long, I could still be in pretty deep ketosis. I could still have ketones in the mid twos, but my sugar goes up. I'm testing my blood every morning. And if my sugar is like in the 90s and I do that too many days in a row, and also if it's combined with weight gain because I'm eating too much, then I will get irritable and angry. And unfortunately, those are my most prominent symptoms. I said those are the first ones that come out. So I have had meat do that to me. And I have, interestingly enough, I have had meats that are not on lion. Like I have had rotisserie chickens talk to me. They call me if they're down the street at the grocery store and they call me.
Yeah.
And over the summer when I was eating a bunch of chicken with Samantha, cooked chicken, that would, and it would always be combined with salted too. And I have had, since going raw, I've had salted grilled steaks calling me, but fat
Mhm.
has never done that to me.
That's interesting.
Fat has never spoken to me like that.
I love that. I love that. But I love that you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's that voice. So for me, it's I refer to it as the demon inside me. And it's represented like I'm wearing a skull ring right now. Like this is my physical representation. Like I keep them there to remind me because I'm trying, life is not always easy and I like to have the reminder. But you're talking about the food item calling you, but I'm talking about this is my demon who's talking to me. And he's like, well, just go have the chicken down the street. And then
Yeah.
in 3 days, I know what'll be happening. I'll be eating ice cream and Snickers and Reese's, and I will be miserable, and I will have skin issues, and I will be depressed, and I will be snapping at my daughter and my wife, and life will totally suck. That's where it ends. So some people think I'm crazy. They're like, really? You can't eat that much meat? I'm like, this is where it ends every time. I've been down this road a million times. Yeah, it starts with a cooked steak, and then it's rotisserie chicken, and then it ends in Snickers and ice cream, and the whole family's a mess. That's what happens.
Wow. Wow. That's so interesting. And that would happen to me whenever I was eating raw. And I would eat a steak and it would make me off. I was just off of my game. I felt just so pure in the raw meat and the raw fat. Um, but yeah, I'm so grateful that you've totally been able to navigate that.
The problem is sticking to it. And the problem is doing it consistently long term and navigating life and navigating stress and navigating holidays, things like that. It's it's hard. It's very hard. So a lot of people will say when you go from a standard American diet to a low carb diet and you enter into ketosis, you flip a switch and you become a different person. And so for me, that's true. But I've found this second switch that I can flip. I call it my turbo boost. And that's when I'm keeping my fat really high on most days, I get that turbo boost. So I go from an 8 to a 10. And being at the 10 feels so good. There's this such an extra level of calmness there to where you said like you could have a flat tire or your friends lying about you and you're like, "Oh, I wonder where this is going to end." There's a I get that when I'm at a 10, but I won't necessarily have that at the 8. And there's a clarity and this just higher level of function in life. It's just hard to stay at that 10 for extended periods, especially now. What in the summer, it's easy because the sun's out, it's warm, I'm thriving. And then it gets cold and the days are getting shorter. And it's been a challenge. I don't want anybody out there to think that I'm some kind of perfectionist or that I'm some kind of robot and that I can just eat 90-10 every single day and my life is perfect. I'm never going to consider myself as having reached the destination. I'm always on this path. I'm never there. I'm never always, I'm never going to be just like there and that's it. I'm done. It's still a daily struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to talk about that's important to you?
No, I think we covered a lot. I think one thing I will say is that um, start where you're at. Like, just start where you're at. I mean, if like I had this one client who would have, I think it was 9 diet sodas a day, and so he was just like, okay, we're going to do this, and I'm going to stop, drinking the diet sodas and blah blah blah. And I'm like, how many years have you had that many diet sodas a day? And he's like, about 30. And I'm like, And how many times have you tried to stop? And he was like, I can't even count. And I'm like, okay, so how about for tomorrow, let's go and have our goal be that you have 8 diet sodas tomorrow. And he's like, no. He was like, they're poison. They're horrible. I'm killing myself. And I'm like, yeah, but the goal is compliance. And so if you can't comply, then the you have to shift what you're doing. And so we went, and the whole week he had 8 diet sodas a day. And every day I was like, I am so proud of you. And he was like, you're crazy. He was like, you're stupid. And I was like, that's okay. I was like, go ahead. I'm proud of you. You said you were going to have 8 and you had 8. You met your goal. That is success. And then the next week I was like, all right, let's have 7 diet sodas a day. And then eventually, like, start where you're at. Recognize that you can only go to the pace of your central nervous system. If you try and rip the band-aid off and you're not bipolar, it's not helpful. But if you're bipolar, then that's the way to go. But you have to just take it at your pace, because your central nervous system is your greatest team member. And you have to make sure that you guys are in sync, and you have to make sure that you guys are on the same page. If your central nervous system thinks you're killing it, then you're going to short circuit. And so start where you're at, and then just make those baby steps to gradually get there. And you're going to do it. And you're totally capable of doing things that, like, I mean, Steven and I never in a million years would think that this would be our life, ever. Ever. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I'd have been like, me wake up? No. Me sustain life? No. So you just got to start where you're at.
If you go back to when I was a vegetarian and a vegan, and towards the end I was a raw vegan, and if you told me that I'd be eating large piles of beef fat, I would have told you were absolutely crazy. Never thought I'd be doing this.
I know, it's crazy.
But I love what you were just talking about, because you're speaking my language, and for myself and for other people that I'm helping, and even for like designing my wife's workout programs. I always go by simple philosophy is to take it easy and go slow and be gentle on yourself, and don't ever bite off more than you can chew, because you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I had a friend that I was helping a while back, and he was complaining about maybe it was donuts he was eating or something at night, like the mini donuts. And he's like, I'm so pissed off. I wasn't gonna have any carbs today, and then I went and I had donuts. Well, I said, how many did you have? He had 6. I'm like, all right, so you keep messing up and you keep eating these donuts. So for tomorrow, just have 5. And then the next day, just have 4. And he reacted the same way your patient did. And he was like, no, I want to get rid of all carbs. Like, but you cannot handle that, because you've tried it 30 times now and you failed 30 times. Let's set a goal that you can actually succeed. And then you know what? You can find comfort in the fact that you're going to be having the donuts tomorrow. You can just allow yourself to think about it all day, but you're only going to have 5. And then by the end of the week, you're only going to have 1, and then you'll have a day where you have none. But you got to take it slow. You got to be gentle on yourself. And like you said, you got to set yourself up for a goal that you can actually accomplish. You can't just keep failing every day, because it's just you're going to feel like a miserable failure and a mess that you can't even accomplish anything. So you got to have small, attainable goals that are easy to reach. I feel like I'm talking to myself here. It's been great.
It's fun.
uh, all right. Are you ready to get into our closing?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I have 2 questions that are posed to your younger self. And the first one is related to diet and mental health. And this is, what is a piece of advice you'd give to your younger self before you discovered the diet, something that would have helped you get through the tough times?
I think I would tell my younger self, you're not broken. You're brilliant. There is nothing wrong with you. Everything that is happening is a logical response. There is nothing broken in your body. There is nothing broken in your mind. All of your behaviors, all of your physical reactions, it all makes sense for what you're inputting into your body. And that would be the main thing I would want her to know, is that she is brilliant, because for the whole first 40 years, I just thought I was broken and I didn't know that I was actually brilliant.
If someone would have told me that when I was at my worst, that would have definitely helped get me through the tough times, because the way it was described as, and bipolar is this big mountain and you're going to be climbing it for your entire life and you're going to be taking pills for your entire life. And I felt like I was broken and there was no fix and there was no cure. Thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah.
So the second question is similar, but it's not related to diet or mental health. It's just, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Um, I think I would definitely give myself the advice to take it easy on myself. I have made things a lot more difficult than they needed to be, because I was operating in self shame and guilt, and just like the things I said to myself were so mean, like so mean. And I realized that through loving myself, I was able to tap into way more power. So I would probably tell myself to take it easy on myself.
And that's like the same advice that you were just giving your patient and then I was giving my friend. And what I love about these questions is that they're posed to your younger self, but the answers that I get from my guests, they're for everybody. Everybody should take that advice. Take it easy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, and this brings us to my signature question. This is a question that should encourage you to share a broader, more philosophical insight or a life lesson that ties into your experience with the ketogenic lifestyle and provide something meaningful and potentially even new after our in depth interview. I call this my fat fueled philosophy. What's one powerful piece of fat fueled philosophy, a life lesson, or a mantra that you've embraced on your ketogenic journey and that you think could inspire our listeners?
Mine would definitely be inner clarity. We all have that inner knowing inside of us, and we are seeking out answers from Dr. So and so and this YouTuber and this scientific journal article, and we're reaching outside of us. And that is totally missing the message that you have inner knowing. You have this inner power, and all you got to do is just gather all the information, take a deep breath, and learn to listen to your inner clarity, because nobody knows the answer. Doctors don't know what they're talking about. Me and Steven don't know what we're talking about for you. Only you know the answers for you. And even blood tests don't know the answer, even MRIs, even everything. You are the only one who knows the answer and can really guide your life. And so I would just say go into your inner clarity, your inner knowing. And you can't steer a car that is not moving. So pick a direction and start driving that way. And then you can turn if you need to turn. You can change, you can switch up the experiment, but just start with an experiment and then navigate it through that.
That was brilliant. I'm going to give you a round of applause. Hopefully, it comes out today. Yeah, I really love that. That was just amazing. Thank you so much. So, now, have you had a chance to see any of my shows?
I have not,
Okay, that's good. That's good. So, you don't know what's coming.
I don't know what's coming.
So, I have my tenets in life, and it starts with the ketogenic diet, of course. And I have sunshine and body movement and meditation and all these things I do. But one of my tenets in life is to have fun and enjoy life. Because if we can't have fun, what's the point, right? If we can't enjoy life, what's the point?
I love it.
This is my rapper persona. And I have my tagline for the show, and I have fun with it, but it's not funny. It's serious. My tagline is fix yourself with fat. So I do it in my own unique way. It's fix yourself with fat. What I've been doing is asking all my guests to do the tagline for us. And I've been putting a compilation together of all my guests. I'm going to come out with a video eventually of everybody saying, I've got my daughter and my wife and all my different guests saying, fix yourself with fat. So what do you think, Emily? Is that something you can do for us today?
Absolutely. Are you ready?
Ready when you are.
All right. fix yourself with fat.
I love it. That was great. That was great.
How fun.
I could just talk to you for hours about this stuff, man.
Aw, I
I really
love that. I love that we've been on the same journey.
Yeah, it makes me feel I'm having a hard time. I've been having a hard time putting it into words how it makes me feel, but just like emotional. Like it makes me feel like I want to cry, but not in a bad way, just like in a happy way. And it's like it's just so amazing that somehow we've gotten to the same destination, but following the path and listening to our bodies. And I don't know. It's so hard for me to put into words.
It always makes me really super curious because I'm like, I wonder if we're just like a different, like, model or serial number of human, like that we thrive so much on fat, and like I just wonder what it is with the technology in our brain, and maybe we'll know at the end of this life, and we'll be like, oh yeah, Steven was a XR240 and so was
Right.
I, you know.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if when we start learning more about mitochondria, if they'll be able to do a test someday and say, hey, you're going to need to do the Stephen T diet or the Emily diet because we can tell from your mitochondria you're going to need the high fat. I hope
Yeah,
someday that'll be true.
yeah. And I part of me is like, dang it, someone should have told me. But another part of me, like, it's so empowering that we got here as the pioneers. Like, nobody told us how to get here and we got here. Like, that's amazing.
It is. Yeah. We're very lucky.
Well, stay in touch. And if you ever need anything, just reach out. I want to support everything that you're doing,
Thank you.
because there's no way I could reach all the people that we need to reach.
Right.